Let's start with running back Bijan Robinson out of Texas. And 2 weeks ago in our favorite segment, Rick's Picks, you talked about how you, as the Minnesota Vikings, landed on Adrian Peterson back in 2007. Bijan Robinson, if he came out 15 years ago, would probably, it feels like, be a top 5 pick. This year, I'll be interested to see if he goes top 15 or even top 20. What are your thoughts on Bijan Robinson, who, and I'll be honest with you, he's my running back too. We can talk about that in a second.
Yeah, okay. Well, we'll get that fixed as we go through the podcast, as we do every week. But
all right,
this is the most complete running back I've seen this year, because he is a big back that has excellent vision as an inline runner. For a guy this size, he can make stop-start type cuts and very elusive in small areas. He has great contact balance, and what I mean by that is that you see him get hit, but yet always going forward and gaining extra yards after the contact. He has tremendous speed to the outside in the open field. He's a big play threat every time he gets the ball in his hands. He's an excellent receiver out of the backfield. He's willing and more than willing, although he needs some technique work to clean up and pass protection. To me, he is as close to Saquon Barkley as any running back that's came out in recent memory. And that's who he reminded me of the most. If it was back 10, 15 years ago, I would have no question that this guy would be a top 5 pick. And I would still argue, take out the quarterbacks, that this may be the most explosive overall offensive playmaker coming out in this year's draft. Where the question comes, and where the questions come in the draft room, are how do we as an organization value a running back? And This kid has a lot of tread on his tires. The running back shelf life, as we refer to it, or where they reach the critical age in their career, is a lot shorter than any other position out there on the football field. So if you're going to take this guy, and I do think that he can be a game changer for you on offense, it's just how do you value running backs nowadays?
Yeah, that's right. That's the question. I think in a lot of ways, we were all spoiled by Adrian Peterson's athleticism, because even when he suffered that ACL injury, he came back in record time just because physically he
was a freak.
He was a freak. Absolutely. And I think sometimes we ascribe those physical qualities to other players, and it's just not fair when we find out physically that they can't do the things that Adrian Peterson does. So to your larger point, is Saquon Barkley worth the top 5 pick, given how his career's unfolded? And he's having a fantastic year this year. He had the ACL injury last year that kept him out, and he was certainly good early in his career the first year. But like, if you had a time machine, I don't know if you take Saquon Barkley there, just because, as you mentioned, how do you value a running back?
Yeah, and a couple of points. If you watched the game last night against the Commanders, if it wasn't for Saquon Barkley, I don't think the Giants would have had a chance to win, because what you've seen when you had a premier running back, especially on that last drive where they ate up so much of that clock in the fourth quarter because of Barkley hitting 10 yards, hitting 15, hitting 14 yards, and kept the clock moving. And I don't know if the New York Giants would be as successful as they are this year. And I give credit to the head coach and to what he's done with that roster, because they still have a lot of rebuilding to do. But hell, they're in the playoffs right now.
Yeah.
But a lot of that has to do with because of the player that Barkley is. The issue is how durable, regardless of what the name is at that position, the running back position, how durable are they to line up and take those hits 16, 17, and then if you get into playoff weeks in a row. I mean, even look at Derrick Henry, who was a monster-sized running back, and how many hits he takes, but how important is he to that Tennessee offense? When I looked, he had almost 56% of the offensive touches. The next guy, and it was like over at the time I looked at it, 256 times out of 460-some touches on offense, he had the ball in his hands. Okay, the next closest guy was a player that had 40 touches. So the whole Tennessee offense is around Derrick Henry, but that's kind of unique in today's NFL.
And incidentally, Derrick Henry ended up being a second-round pick, got the second contract, which wasn't a deal-breaking contract. So It'll be interesting to see what happens with Saquon because his deal is going to be up. They could franchise him. They could give him a big money Zeke Elliott type deal, or perhaps they could do something differently. But if you're watching on YouTube, Debo just threw up the graphic, and Debo's producing, which is always great. First round running backs taken since 2015. And they've always, the 2015, 2016, not 2016, 2015, 2017, 2018, and 2021 all had at least 2 running backs go in the first round. So while the value of running backs may be different than what it was when Adrian Peterson was drafted, for example, NFL teams are still rolling the dice, so to speak, on these running backs. And some have been hits, and like Saquon, I think, when he's certainly healthy, and certainly Christian McCaffrey, and some less so. I would imagine that the Chiefs would like a do-over in Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He's been injured, but they've seen Isaiah Pacheco, the rookie, the 7th rounder out of Rutgers. He's carried the load. Jerick McKinnon had a huge game yesterday, and they signed him in free agency. Melvin Gordon, I think, maybe you got your money's worth if you were the then San Diego Chargers out of him. He's had the fumbling issues since. But let me ask you this, Rick. We talk about Bijan as your number one. My number one is Jahmyr Gibbs. And is there an opportunity, do you think? And they're completely different players. You and I've talked about the similarities between Gibbs and Alvin Kamara and your guy Dalvin Cook, and you mentioned Bijan and Saquon. Is there room in this draft for 2 running backs? I'm assuming you like Jahmyr Gibbs, number 2, to go in round 1?
Yeah, no, I think there is. But again, it's going to be on the team's philosophy and what they value. Because if you have the problem is when you're looking at that draft board, and let's say you need an offensive tackle, and all the offensive tackles are gone,
right,
that you had valued at your pick, and you're getting on the clock, and you're staring at that draft board, you keep seeing this running back from Texas just looking at you in the face.
Mm-hmm.
That's where teams start to go. Do you go by need, or do you go by best available player on the board? And we always took the philosophy, and we did with the Adrian Peterson pick, although he was a freak, was that we had, as I talked about, Chester Taylor, who just came off a 1,000-yard season. But we felt Adrian Peterson, and the way we were going to scheme our offense, that he was going to be the focal point of our offense. And, you know, I think he's a future Hall of Famer before it's said and done. But today's NFL and today's game has changed, where it seems like there's going to be more value on a number 1 receiver than it is on a number 1 running back. And when you say some of the names that you said, there are a lot of very, very good running backs that you can get later in the draft, potentially as a college free agent, that have just as much success, maybe not as much publicity as Robinson coming out of Texas or an Adrian Peterson, but they have had a lot of success.
All right, so I'll mention these 2 things. And Debo just had the graphic up in my latest mock draft. Tell me which fit you like better, or in typical Rick's fashion, if you hate them both, you can let me know that too. So I've had Bijan Robinson going to the Buccaneers around 19th or so in recent mock drafts. Now, the Bucs have a million needs, but just for the sake of argument, you can take that one, or you can take, I've had Jahmyr Gibbs going at the end of the first round with the Eagles' 2nd pick, just to give Jalen Hurts one more weapon, both as a running back, obviously, and as a receiver. Do you like one better than the other? Do you hate them both, or do you obviously love both of them?
I'm asking you, what's your philosophy? Do you take a running back if you're a general manager in the first round?
I do not.
The values there? Then why are you putting them in the mock draft?
Well, part of it's projecting where we think these guys, these young men, might end up going. I wouldn't. Like a couple of years ago, the Steelers took Najee Harris, and that felt like it wasn't even a secret by March, and that ended up happening. Was that their best use of resources? Maybe, but probably not. I mean, they have needs along the offensive line. They have needs in the secondary, and I'll have to go back. I would have to go back and check who was drafted after Najee, and maybe the pick turned out being the right one, given that there was nothing behind them. But I mean, there are going to be teams that are going to seriously consider both those players, Robinson and Gibbs, I would think, right?
Yeah, and if you're talking about Tampa, they do definitely need a running back. White, who they drafted last year out of Arizona State, flashes, but I don't know if he is as consistent as they need to be. I think the biggest thing is what they're going to do at quarterback. And let's say they have a young quarterback. Well, in order to take heat off the quarterback, let's get a premier running back that can carry the load while the quarterback develops. So that may be a conversation in a draft room. With Philadelphia, the rich get richer. And if they end up, although Sanders has had a very good year this year, But if they end up with a Jahmyr Gibbs, who to me is the most explosive playmaker, although he is little in both as a runner and as a passer, but I don't think he's going to be able to carry a load like a Robinson can because he's smaller framed. And if you look at some of the stuff that he's done when he plays a lot, and we're talking about Gibbs, I think he kind of took the game over when Alabama played Tennessee. And I think he had 88 snaps. But that is a lot of hits. That is a lot of reps for a small running back. And then the following week, I believe they played Mississippi State, and then he didn't have as many reps. So to me, he's a 1A-B, but he also needs a partner to go with him.
No, that makes sense. And Debo points out to me that you ruined my Steelers because you took Christian Darrisaw the pick before they had to take Najee. Maybe Darrisaw could be a Pittsburgh Steeler. So thanks for that, Rick.